Some of the most famous and celebrated directors have done one of the rarest feats one could achieve in a filmography: remaking their own movie. Alfred Hitchcock, Cecil B. DeMille, Sam Raimi, Robert Rodriguez, Howard Hawks, Chang Cheh, John Woo, and others have all found reason to revisit their past productions and make another attempt. Today on MicroGenres, I'm going to look at 10 films remade by their directors and try and figure out why. Now, before we get into the list proper, I just want to take a moment and thank one of my patrons for their support. This was their choice on the video, so thank you, Alex. And for everybody else, I do have a Patreon. The link is in the video description, and it's free. I do have paying tiers for people who can afford a buck or two in support, but everything on my Patreon is free, and it's all exclusive to Patreon right now. None of it has been posted here on YouTube. So if you just want more content, check out my Patreon. Link is in the description. Now, let's get to the video proper, because I took a long time to write this script, and Alex has been waiting, and I hope this lives up to the hype. It's a long one, but I tried to be thorough. Filmmaking is an arduous, exhausting process, and it takes a crazy amount of time. Between the pre-production of raising money or getting interest from studios, to languishing in post-production woes and legal quagmires, to the endless procession of film festivals and media promotion to get the word out, people, especially directors, can be attached to a film project for years, and filming it might only be a matter of weeks. Many projects never see the light of day, and most of the time, a project will be twisted into something unrecognizable by the time it gets to theaters. Make no mistake, if you tried to reproduce your own work, the insinuation is usually that you weren't happy with the final result of the original. And while that is exactly the case in some of these examples, for audiences many times the original was already a classic, important work. Even more impressive is when the director tops themselves, making an even better product as they'd hoped. A perfect example of this is Sam Raimi's Evil Dead. The first movie's a cult classic film, and by itself would have been an impressive legacy in my opinion, but there aren't many who would challenge the claim that Evil Dead 2 is much better. By honing their craft and getting better at all the gags, increasing the budget certainly helps, and the added slapstick humor that amps up the movie, that's all key to its identity for movie fans. Evil Dead 2 is one of the best horror comedy standards by any measure. And I know that there are some people out there saying, Evil Dead 2 is a sequel, hence the 2 at the end.
So there's a big debate of, is Evil Dead 2 a remake or a sequel? It's a requel. You know, it's whatever you want to call it.
But as we move forward on the list, expect the unexpected. These movies can have entirely different titles. They can even be hiding that they are remakes at all. Now, I'm sure that there are more examples out there, and if you know some good ones, please leave a comment below, but today I'm just going to cover 10 examples. Alrighty? Let's do it! Number 1. The 10 Commandments, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Cecil B. DeMille is one of the first pioneer directors of the medium, and so it just feels like a perfect place to start. DeMille constructed the idea of what a director was, like the image that, like how we see a director on set with the little hat and the chair and the little bullhorn and everything, that's largely defined by DeMille. DeMille was a co-founder of the famous Player Lasky studio, which was the precursor to Paramount Studios, and it became Paramount during his time there. He made the highest grossing films of his day. He was prolific, actually, making 70 films in his career and transitioning from the silent era to sound and color. And having a career that spans such incredible leaps in cinema technology would be reason enough to remake his own film. But I think we can go a little deeper. When DeMille made the 10 Commandments the first time in 1923, he felt it was important because of the scandals at the time in Hollywood and the general fallout from World War I, where people were seeing a lot of, social degradation, and so he sets out making his first biblical epic. I think that the most interesting thing about the black and white silent version that sets it apart from the 1956 color version is that the historical biblical part of the story with Moses and parting the Red Sea is only the first half of the movie. The second half takes place in modern 1923 times. The story follows two brothers who are very different. There's a good brother and a bad brother, a Cain and Abel story. And we see the biblical themes of the Ten Commandments playing out as we see the two brothers make their decisions. This second story was a way of teaching people how those 10 very old rules could still be applicable or relevant to people's lives even now, or then, 1923. DeMille remade his most successful movie in 1956, and he had all the reasons to remake it. Fans wrote to him over the decades asking him to remake it. If he had thought that the fallout from World War I took a toll on people, I would imagine a post-World War II environment he would find just as in need of moral clarity by his view. The technology had leapt forward, giving us sound and color and improved special effects. The decision to only remake the first half, the prologue section of the movie, getting rid of the contemporary story, was because DeMille felt that the contemporary story had dated itself, actually, while the historical part had aged better, and I would say that decision helped make it the success it became. The cast includes Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, Edward G. Robinson, Vincent Price. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning for special effects. It quadrupled the cost of production at the box office. This was DeMille's last film, and he died 10 years later. Seems like a pretty good way to go out, leaving your legacy on a strong note. Alright, film number 2. Alfred Hitchcock is the director, and the film is The Man Who Knew Too Much, made in 1934 and then again in 1956. The story is about a family on vacation who get caught up in international espionage when their son is kidnapped. Alfred Hitchcock is the master of suspense and made this film in black and white in 1934 and then revisited the plot again in 1956 in color. Francois Truffaut famously interviewed Hitchcock for 3 days, recording the entire conversation, which has been turned into a book and a movie. I have both, and they go over all of Hitchcock's filmography in detail. Specifically for The Man Who Knew Too Much, Truffaut makes his case for why the remake is the superior film. There's a climactic scene in the film where an assassination is going to be carried out during an orchestral piece of music, and the gunshot happens during the cymbal crashes, and how the scene was cut together and crafted in a more dynamic way, a rigorous attention to detail, adding more humor. To all of this, Hitchcock says, quote, "Let's say the first version is the work of a talented amateur, and the second was made by a talented professional." End quote. In the liner notes of the Blu-ray, classic film enthusiast Farron Smith Name disputes this by saying, quote, "Nowadays, Hitchcock's 1956 remake is often judged the superior picture, largely for its darker tone and greater complexity, two qualities beloved by critics. The marriage is rockier and fraught with psychological conflict, the vacation setting more remote and dangerous, the boy's peril and the mother's dilemma considerably more emphasized. There are some of us, however, who stubbornly appreciate the original for its mordant wit, its overcast snowscapes and London night times, its economy of plot and barreling momentum. And not even Hitchcock can keep us from mourning when confronted with a new villain in place of Peter Lorre." End quote. Even considering the story had many changes, and all seemingly to tighten and improve the final product, it could be that Hitchcock chose a familiar story that he knew he could dust off quickly to fulfill the demands of his studio contract that required one more film. He commissioned a scriptwriter and told him not to see the original movie or read the original script. Instead, he got the synopsis from Hitchcock's pitch, and off he went, distilling the plot on his own. I personally think the remake is the better film, even if it doesn't have the inimitable Peter Lorre. It's worth pointing out that despite having made about 15 films before it, The Man Who Knew Too Much is the first truly Hitchcock thriller that would set the direction for almost all of his films to come. Okay, film number 3, directed by Chang Che, Men from the Monastery in 1974, remade into The Shaolin Avengers in 1976. Now, I did a micro-genre video on all the Pai Mei movies, and in that list was Shaolin Avengers from 1976, and in that video I mentioned how it was a remake of The Men from the Monastery only 2 years earlier in 1974. I didn't discuss Men from the Monastery further because Pai Mei doesn't actually show up, and instead gives orders from the shadows. We hear his voice, and he's referred to as White Brows, but that's it. Feng Sai-yuk was one of the warriors in both movies. The character is a folk hero in China, and there have been numerous movies based on his life or legend, including the Jet Li movie Legend and Legend 2. There are enough Feng Sai-yuk movies that I can and probably at some point will do a microgenre video on them in the future. I tried to get a consensus of which movie here people think is the better one, but after reading a long comment thread, I ended up realizing that people were more focused on whether Chang-Chi was gay because of all the guys running away from women and on account of all the swords that are going up people's butts. Because that was their one weakness. You know, sword up the butt. People seem split 50-50 on which is the better film. While both have their avid fans, Chang-Chi did something most other films on this list shy away from, making drastic changes in their presentation. Men from the Monastery is a totally linear narrative. We see the three men, we see them train, we see them get their revenge on Wu-Tang. In Shaolin Avengers, we're starting the story at the end, and we see their origins in flashback, creating a non-linear narrative. Now, some people feel that the first movie was more original, while fans of the remake feel as though a remixed narration strengthens the plot. I think there's improvement in Shaolin Avengers and a more polished refinement as Che improved his craft. But there are also charming experimental moments in the first film, like placing the title credits an hour into the film, or making some scenes in sepia and other quick violent cuts in blood red. And of course, Pai Mei's in the remake. Alright, and our fourth selection, directed by Todd Browning, London After Midnight from 1927, remade into Mark of the Vampire in 1935. One of the foremost horror directors of his day, Todd Browning has a number of classics on his filmography, and one interesting entry there is the silent film London After Midnight in 1927. This was a Lon Chaney film, and at the time was well received. You might be familiar with the iconography of Chaney's makeup more so than the movie itself. And that's because in 1965, the original print burned in a fire at MGM Studios along with numerous other prints. Now, you would think that that would be reason enough to remake it, but Browning had already remade the film in 1935 just for the simple addition of sound and being able to make it into a talkie. Although he did rename it Mark of the Vampire. While it doesn't have the incredible Man of a Thousand Faces Lon Chaney, a vampire could do worse than to be played by Bela Lugosi. The newer film, as it is now, has an hour-long runtime, while it was originally 80 minutes long when released, and nobody's really sure what got cut and why. The second film doesn't have Lon Chaney's Madman in it, and it comes out a bit dry and plain because of it. The remake is also often the subject of debate due to the ending. The plot involves a death which is attributed to a local vampire, but by the end it's revealed that it was all an extremely convoluted scheme to marry somebody's daughter, which is either thought of as clever, subverting the genre, or just a tacky ending that didn't have the guts of standing in its genre proudly. I know I mentioned that the print for London After Midnight burned, and so we can't see the film itself, but if any of you were interested in seeing what does remain, Turner Classics edited together a half-hour version of the film using the script and available still images and text. This is how we best see Chaney's eerie makeup. You can find this version on YouTube, though I will say that it's pretty odd without any music. Like, I instinctually expected someone to have put in a temp music score just to fill up the silence, but nope. One last thing connected to the movie that's a fun little factoid, but Kirk Hammett from Metallica, he collects old movie posters and has one of these posters, the only one that exists today, and he bought it at an auction for almost $500,000. That's the most expensive sale for a movie poster ever, and it's in his coffee table book that I have right over there. Number 5, directed by the Pang brothers, Bangkok Dangerous, remade into Bangkok Dangerous. Okay, This is crazy. In 1999, the Hong Kong filmmaking duo known collectively as the Pang Brothers made their directorial debut with an almost John Woo-ish type story about a deaf-mute assassin who finds love and a new appreciation for life, but not long before the violent world he inhabits catches up with him. In 2008, almost a decade later, they remake the film with the same title for American audiences, starring Nicolas Cage. But this wasn't their only other film in between. They made other hits including The Eye, which spawned 3 sequels, and each have also made dozens of films individually rather than as a duo. The Nicolas Cage remake is pretty universally panned. It didn't do well financially, and it wasn't critically acclaimed. So, why did they do it? Well, we can start with Nick Cage buying the remake rights to the film. I mean, that's exciting, right? If your debut movie is a hit and then a big Hollywood star like Nick Cage wants to remake your film, you'd probably be stoked. And I think the motives are out in the open. They were looking to expand their audience, break into the North American film market. Nick Cage is a bankable name. This all seems to be career-minded and coming from a business perspective of elevating their brand. So why didn't it work? Or did it work? A year before, they had made The Messengers, an American horror movie starring an up-and-coming phenom, Kristen Stewart, that did pretty well and spawned its own sequel, but Bangkok Dangerous fell prey to the trap of working with a big name like Cage. The first thing they did was cast him as the lead, and then cop to a Hollywood conceit that Cage can't be deaf or mute. Which is, of course, the entire concept of the film. Instead, they make his girlfriend deaf and mute. So this already moves the main idea of the movie to a less effective and watered-down concept. And then we have the tired trope of the white guy being the lead in what is still, at essence, a foreign film. They didn't take the concept and set it in America, with all Americans. They wanted the Bangkok atmosphere, the ambiance, the flavor, the culture. But they couldn't sell that to the West without a white hero guy. It's just sitting right on the face of it. Now, I'm sure they had fun making it. I hope that they got paid. And hey, if Nicolas Cage wanted me to compromise my artistic vision for a fat paycheck and hanging out with Ghost Rider for a few months, I would probably agree as well. But sadly, the final result is in cheap discount bins now. Number 6. Takashi Shimizu, Ju-on and the Grudge. Okay, are you now ready for the really crazy? Because Takashi Shimizu takes the prize for directors remaking their own films. Ju-on and The Grudge, they're not really my kind of horror movies. I just didn't get into their aesthetic. I didn't find them scary, but I did find them slow. They're definitely creepy, but with such a disjointed narrative, I just never got pulled into them. Ju-on is a haunted house movie, but specifically a Japanese haunted house because the mythology of the nature of the ghost or spirit comes from Japanese folklore. An unrequited emotion, metastasized and festering in the house, begins to consume anybody who enters the house. Main iconic horror monsters in this series manifest themselves as a creepy little boy or the long hair lady who drags herself down the stairs. Now, while I'm not a big fan of the franchise, I do want to give massive credit to the sound department, without which I think the movie would be less than half of what it is. And that's not a slam against it. I think the same thing about the 1978 Halloween. Like, music is huge, but sound design can add so much tension and character to the movie like they do here. It can be a beautiful thing. Shimizu makes Ju-on the Grudge in 2002, and then he makes a sequel in 2003, and then he remakes the first film into an American theatrical vehicle, white actors replacing the Japanese ones. For some of these entries, I have to speculate on the reasoning for them to remake their own movie, but luckily for me, it's pretty much the first thing producer Sam Raimi says in the special features.
You know, there's a large American audience that won't go see a film made in Japan starring Japanese actors in Japanese. I felt this was such a great story that the rest of the world should see it. And so that's what led to the decision to remake it with American actors in English so that the American audience could appreciate it.
Okay, so the motivation is accounted for, and I think to great success in at least as much as the box office was huge, the timing was right, as Japanese horror was making all kinds of waves in the industry with other movies like The Ring and think there was some other one with white noise, maybe. It wasn't my genre. And it probably didn't hurt that Sarah Michelle Gellar, at the height of her career, had finished up with her TV phenomenon Buffy the Vampire Slayer and would bring her army of fans with her to any theatrical endeavor she was involved in. But I said Shimizu was bringing the crazy, right? So why? Well, after The Grudge in 2004, he also remakes the sequel, Ju-on the Grudge 2, from 2003. He remakes that in 2006 as The Grudge 2. So he remade the first movie, and then he remade the sequel. So that's already nuts, right?
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Okay, well then how about this? Ju-on the Grudge from 2002 is actually the third movie in the series, following straight-to-video releases in 2000 and 2001 called Ju-on the Curse 1 and Ju-on the Curse 2, and they were directed by Takashi Shimizu. And this has to be a record that one director made one of his films remade one of his films 3 times, and then also remade the sequel 3 times, or remade it twice. So he made it 3 times. And they're all pretty much the exact same movie, that's crazy. Now, number 7 on our list, directed by Howard Hawks, we have Rio Bravo and El Dorado. I wrestled with whether or not I should include Rio Bravo on this list. Let me explain. Rio Bravo from 1959 is considered by many to be a perfect Western. It stars John Wayne and is directed by Howard Hawks, 2 titans of the genre. Rio Bravo is about a sheriff named Chance, played by Wayne, who holds a rich man's brother in jail to wait for trial. The entire movie is Chance, his deputy, a drunk played by Dean Martin, the best role he ever got in my opinion, and his old disabled sidekick Stumpy, played by Walter Brennan. Yeah, that guy over there. That's the guy. They hold out against insurmountable odds. The movie is a hangout movie. It's not filled with action, even though the action scenes are really great, but it's a movie where you're waiting with the characters, getting to know them, watching them bond. Tarantino has said that it's a litmus test for any date. If she doesn't like Rio Bravo, then there's no chance. Okay, so why would I doubt putting Rio Bravo on this list? Well, it's widely considered that Howard Hawks remade Rio Bravo with El Dorado in 1966, but the thing is it a remake? I mean, not strictly. It's got a different plot and different characters, but there have been plenty of people who consider it a remake.
You broke in my house and I have a witness to it.
What?
Only this time it ain't no John Wayne or Dean Martin shooting bad guys in El Dorado.
That was Rio Bravo. Robert Mitchum played the drunk in El Dorado. Dean Martin played the drunk in Rio Bravo. Basically, it was the same part. Now, John Wayne, he did the same on both. He played John Wayne.
Man, I can't wait for you to be dead.
So both movies have John Wayne in similar roles. Both are directed by Howard Hawks and written by Lee Brackett, who said, quote, "The more we got into doing Rio Bravo over again, the sicker I got, because I hate doing things over again. And I kept saying to Howard, I did that, and he'd say, it was okay, we could do it over again," end quote. So even though Wayne doesn't play the sheriff in El Dorado like he did in Rio Bravo, and the drunk this time out is the sheriff, the plot functions almost like, like a remix, which is why so many people consider it a remake. As for why did he remake his own film? Honestly, I think he was just having fun. He was working with his friends, and after the acclaim from Rio Bravo, I think Hawks just thought after decades of making westerns that he had just found his winning formula. And El Dorado is very highly regarded, and so Hawks took it one step further and actually remade the movie a third time in 1970, again with John Wayne and Lee Brackett. This time it was called Rio Lobo, and maybe they had gone back to the well one too many times, because that movie's considered a dud. It's actually widely reported that Tarantino referenced Rio Lobo as the reason he only wants to make 10 movies and then retire. Quote, "The most cutting-edge artists, the coolest guys, the hippest dudes, they're the ones that stay at the party too long. They're the ones that make those last 2 or 3 movies that are completely out of touch and don't realize that the world has turned on them. I don't want to make Rio Lobo," end quote. That's a pretty brutal legacy for a movie, to go from Rio Bravo, a Tarantino all-time favorite, to Rio Lobo, the reason he won't make more movies after his 10th. All right, number 8, the director is Michael Mann. And we're talking about LA Takedown and Heat. Everybody knows Michael Mann's Heat from 1995, a towering apex of performances by two of the titans of cinema. But also titans of gangster cinema even on top of that. Pound for pound, each name in the cast is giving top-tier performances in each of their respective careers, and that is saying something when we're talking about Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Val Kilmer, Danny Trejo, Tom Sizemore, Dennis Haysbert, Natalie Portman, William Fichtner, Tom Noonan, Henry Rollins, Tone Loc, Ashley Judd, Kevin Gage. To this day, Heat is considered among the best of the films in the crime genre. It's the ultimate cops and robbers movie, with Pacino attempting to bring down De Niro's crew before they can pull the heist of their careers. It's about how the criminals have a code of ethics and rules to how they conduct their business, while the cop watches his own codes and rules blur as it corrupts him. They both struggle to balance their personal lives with their chosen professions. It's brutal and raw and edgy and potent, and it's the crime movie of all crime movies. We all know this. But not everybody knows that Heat was a remake of a TV movie also directed by Michael Mann in 1989. And it's way ahead of its time. This is great TV at a time when I think TV was considered... well, it was less considered. The movie was pitched as a pilot for a TV series that wasn't picked up, and then released as a TV movie. It got a VHS release and a Region 2 DVD, which is why I never got to see it. This was like legend to me. I wasn't sure I'd ever get to see it. But then it turns out it was just on YouTube for free. Amazing! Takedown also has some cool casting choices, like Xander Berkeley, the only actor to get a role in the remake, who played Waingro. The script was edited down from a 180-page epic, which allowed Mann to expand story threads when he made Heat. Why did he do it? That's the question we're asking, right? I mean, he had a great script. He knew it would play even more cinematically with powerhouse actors. And the script is like word for word and beat for beat. It's shocking how close they are. Characters look like they raided each other's wardrobes and styles.
Is this cruise something, or is this cruise something?
You want to know what they're looking at? What? I mean, is this guy something, or is he something?
I mean, this guy is a mega blast. You know what he's looking to take down here? Nothing. You know what he's looking at? I know what he's looking at. Us. The police department. We just got made, okay?
You know what they're looking at? What? Us. The LAPD. Police Department. We just got made.
But maybe more interesting than why he did it is how he was able to create this apex in the crime genre. And for that, we have to point out his career up to that point. Mann is known for being a producer on Miami Vice, but his work in the 70s and 80s is replete with police shows like Police Story and Starsky and Hutch, Vegas, and movies like Manhunter and Thief. He'd also worked with a police detective who was able to help Mann lend credibility and realism to his script, and whose life became the basis for the Al Pacino character. Pacino's wife in Heat is quite different. His daughter, played by Natalie Portman, didn't exist in LA Takedown, but these changes feel like they were included or explored because we got a longer runtime. Now, when you know Heat, then LA Takedown can feel in places like an Amdram rehearsal, but in others, it's really cool to see another take on these iconic scenes and lines. Like, I would be a liar if I said any of them were comparable to Heat. But this has the feeling of listening to your favorite band's demo tapes. Like, you can hear the magic, you can see the vision, and Heat is that vision fulfilled. In Heat, Mann has the budget and the scope now to let the material breathe. He isn't hampered by broadcast standards, and using LA Takedown as a trial run and sitting with it for a few years has got to be a reason the final result of Heat is so immaculate. Most directors don't get that kind of pre-production. So if you consider that LA Takedown only had a fraction of the budget, only 10 days of pre-production on a 19-day shooting schedule, and they still did the big downtown heist and hit all the beats with a great script and was first to do it, that's impressive. LA Takedown is pretty great and, I don't know, just overshadowed by Heat. Number 9, the director is Antonio Margheriti. Castle of Blood in 1964 gets remade into Web of the Spider in 1971. Now, most movies in this video are remade because enough time has passed and the technology has evolved to where it was worth telling the story again. Sometimes they want to break into another market using a bankable star, but so far they all seem to be double-dipping a previous success. The Ten Commandments, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Bangkok Dangerous, Ju-on, Rio Bravo, they were all critical and box office successes. Even LA Takedown was a critical success. Most people thought it was really good, even though it didn't play in theaters. But this is the first time I've seen a movie fail and then be remade. Castle of Blood tells a story of a writer who makes a bet that he can spend the night in a haunted castle. That's it. A classic, tried and true, honest-to-goodness haunted house story. It's black and white, and the director is, say it with me, Margheriti. Margheriti thinks that the movie is boring, but I happen to really enjoy the photography and mood and the camera angles, which are all interesting and unconventional. Even the plot is a strange creation. The writer goes into the house and then sees ghosts come to life and reenact their deaths. But he's almost the only character in the film aside from the ghosts. Barbara Steele is one of the ghosts, and her involvement evokes another black and white Italian horror classic, Black Sunday by Mario Bava. And that's a pretty flattering comparison, and I don't think they're of the same caliber, but maybe that connection in my mind is sort of warming my perception of Castle of Blood. Now, I couldn't argue with somebody that thought it was slow or boring, but I think it's intentionally atmospheric and creepy and was never trying to astound you, instead opting for a more, mood-driven piece. So Castle of Blood comes out and it's a flop. But despite being on record saying it was a boring movie, Margheriti must have thought there was something to it because he remakes the movie in 1971, and this time it's called Web of the Spider. It's in color, and guess what? Margheriti is on record saying that this one sucks too. He even blames the color, saying that it sucked out the horror. Now, I didn't mention it before, but the first movie was released as Danse Macabre and credited to an Edgar Allan Poe story. And Poe is actually a character in both movies as the guy who makes the bet with our writer to stay in the castle overnight. In this remake, he's played by Crazy Klaus Kinski, but only one problem. There is no Poe story titled Danse Macabre. Isn't that strange? It might seem an odd choice to try and remake a movie that failed, but I actually think it's insanity to remake classics. One of the big flaws in remaking movies that people rarely talk about, whether or not by the same director, is that they set themselves up for failure by attempting to remake really good movies. There are precious few remakes considered better than the original. As Steven Spielberg has said, quote, "To make a film is very, very hard. To make a good film is an almost impossible task." End quote. Well, that might be bragging from that guy. Many times great scripts are mangled during the production and it comes out unrecognizable. Doesn't it make more sense to try again at a good idea that didn't turn out instead of remaking a classic movie that doesn't need replacing? Why are we focused on fixing what was never broken? From an artistic perspective, this makes total sense, right? But sadly, we live in a commercial world, and the truth is that it's far easier to replicate something great than to be original. It's far less risky to sell already established iconography and cultural cachet and nostalgia to make money, and because the goal is almost always short-term gains, the product doesn't actually need to be any good. Once the people buy the ticket to find out, the money's been made. The product endorsement deals and merchandise money has already crossed palms, and that's why most of the horror franchise reboots killed them stone dead. Jason, Freddy. Although it is pretty nuts how many reboots and sequels Halloween is getting. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting dynamic to this entry on the list. I wish people would start digging up old scripts and remaking more failed movies with good ideas instead of tarnishing the reputation and name of these original movies. I do think that the remake lost a step even though they are pretty similar. Saying the color ruined it seems really silly to me, but I did think the black and white photography was better. Although the remake has crazy Klaus Kinski, and so that has an allure all of its own. And last on the list, film number 10, directed by John Woo, The Killer, remade into The Killer. Now, one of the biggest impacts on the action genre in film is the influence of master director John Woo. While he has contributed dozens of films throughout his filmography, he's best known for his Hong Kong action work in the 80s and early 90s that many call gun fu. Woo's innovation was to take the visual flair of traditional kung fu or martial arts movies and combine it with the coolest of the cool. Gun fu is also known as heroic bloodshed films. The bloodshed is obvious, but the heroic part alludes to the code of honor these criminals and gangsters, and often cops, were bound to, operating under their own set of unspoken laws. The gun fu films in question are A Better Tomorrow, 1 and 2, Bullet in the Head, To Catch a Thief, Hard Boiled, and The Killer in 1989. John Woo is the reason people fly through the air in slow motion shooting two guns simultaneously, and they don't have to jump through the air. They could slide across the floor or just spin around on the spot, unloading endless bullets, far more than any clip could contain. Woo's signature hallmarks like slow motion or doves flying around is probably just as important to his success as his casting of Chow Yun-fat. His endless and effortless sense of cool was just as iconic as anything Woo was doing behind the camera. And together, they were an unbeatable team, though they've both gone on to do great work without the other. Now, part of the recipe for Chow Yun-fat's effortless cool comes from Jean-Pierre Melville's 1967 crime masterpiece, Le Samurai, specifically Alain Delon's character of a hitman who is now targeted by the people who hired him. Le Samurai is a pillar of cinema and deserving of a video on its massive influence in cinema, but for now, let's just remember that John Woo's The Killer, as well as other films, were heavily influenced by a French movie. Okay? I'm going to reference that in a minute or two. So between 1986 and 1992, Woo invents a new subgenre of action films and gives them a unique visual style before he leaves Hong Kong for Hollywood, bringing his style with him. And then over a decade after that, he goes back to Hong Kong and continues making films. Now, while he's making his Hollywood films, he is working amongst an entire generation of American directors who are all doing their best to ape his style. Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino are huge fans. Antoine Fuqua even casts Chow Yun-fat for The Replacement Killers and does his most blatant John Woo impression to great effect. I would even say the Wachowskis were taking notes on elegant gunplay and slow motion when they made The Matrix. And Hollywood even hires other Chinese directors to try and capitalize on the hype and craze of this new kinetic style of action, employing Woo's old producer partner Choi Hark for a few Van Damme movies, and also Benny Wong for The Big Hit. I'm sorry for droning on, but I want to make an impression on all of you just how big of a deal John Woo and The Killer from 1989 was. The story is about a contract killer who accidentally blinds an innocent woman while he's in a gunfight. He feels responsible and is drawn to her to help her and befriend her. Meanwhile, the cop who is after him uses the blind girl as the link to get to him. The cop and the assassin realize, despite being on opposite sides, they actually like each other and share a code of ethics. Now, 25 years later, John Woo has remade arguably one of his very finest and highly regarded films for a new generation. But the question, of course, is why? And how did it turn out? Well, for starters, I don't think Woo wanted to remake it. Initially, at least. See, they were in talks to remake The Killer as early as 1992. John Woo was just arriving in America to make Hard Target for Van Damme and begin his Hollywood leg of his career. He went on to direct Broken Arrow and Face Off and Mission Impossible 2 and Paycheck and Wind Talkers, so he was busy with a very successful career. By 2008, he was making Red Cliff in China again, and the remake of The Killer was still languishing in development hell. Various directors and scripts had been commissioned, and they all fell apart. So now here we are, 25 years later. Wu's career has slowed down somewhat, and he must understand that his name on the project as director would carry a lot of weight. And he needs another hit, I think, maybe. He, like most creatives when asked, gives the usual spiel on the wonderful opportunity to revisit the work and put a fresh spin on it and all that, but how did it actually turn out? You know, it's okay. It's okay. It's a competently made film. It's got its moments and overall is generally entertaining, but here's the thing, right? All this preamble I gave you, it was intentional context, because Wu was not just remaking some earlier film of his, he was remaking one of his crowning achievements that influenced and informed decades of action films after it. Nobody is catching lightning twice like that, so really, no matter how well made it was, there's no way the 2024 remake could ever be considered better or even just as good. It's a physical impossibility. The main differing concepts here are the lead being a woman instead of a man and having the entire movie take place in Europe. Now, I don't really care about the gender swap. I don't think it added anything to the film for me, but more importantly, you can't replace Chow Yun-fat. Like, with anybody, a man or a woman, nobody is as cool. I mean, this guy was quite literally the god of killers. Setting the movie in France is only interesting in as much as I had mentioned earlier that one of the key inspirations for Wu creating this cool killer archetype was Le Samurai from 1967, and now Wu was able to film in the same country to make his vision of those locations. Now, despite the setting change and the leading lady, Wu brings us the slow-motion pigeons in the first 5 minutes, and we see the Mexican standoffs we've all come to love, as well as double-fisted guns flying through the air. And there are some neat action sequences for sure, but I'd just rather watch the original. Every time. Some directors wanted to get more exposure in the American market, like Takashi Shimizu or the Pang brothers. And some had to fulfill contractual obligations like Alfred Hitchcock. We've seen directors like Margheriti or Chang Che want a second chance to make a movie they thought didn't turn out quite right the first time. But it's not often a director would want to revisit a movie so iconic and influential, knowing the new film could only ever sit in the long shadow cast by its predecessor. And that's where I think that the 2024 Killer will always be. Maybe part of that is my own expectations going in. I was thrown off by the French location. For some reason, I wanted and expected to see this classic Chinese cultural touchstone to be refurbished in China with Chinese actors. I mean, it makes sense why he wouldn't do that, right? Because he already did it. But now the film feels more like a Luc Besson-produced Euro action movie than The Killer. But if I'm being honest, the real remake of The Killer was The Replacement Killers in 1998 with Chow Yun-fat and Mira Sorvino. I'm sure there are more directors that have remade their own films, but these were the 10 that I found that sounded promising for the video. So, what do you guys think? Did I miss one? Do you have a favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be back next week.